Hey guys, what's up? Please forgive how I sound. It's been a very long, tiring day. And also please forgive the fact that I don't have the camera on, so you can't see my ugly mug talking to you. Yeah, it's just one of them days. And, you know, I got some video game footage of one of my favorite games to play right now. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. Anyway, yeah. So, to continue with the schedule that I am trying to set for myself. This is the second week of the month, so we're going to make a video that's, you know, more like my older videos, the type of stuff that I used to make when I first started this channel. You know, something slightly, you know, ranty / political / philosophical, whatever. And this is on an aspect of, you know, our society today, particularly in the U.S., but I'm pretty sure this is happening elsewhere around the world. You know, a certain aspect of society that is rather disheartening me. It bothers me. And it's the fact that just so many people and different groups of people just can no longer see eye to eye on anything anymore, and can't even have civil discussions on important issues or even minor issues anymore. I've mentioned this before, you guys probably remember, but one thing I keep saying about human society itself is that the reason why we come together in the first place is because that's how we survive. Human beings are social creatures. We are social animals. It's through us coming together that we've been able to overcome many things throughout our relatively short period of time on this planet as compared to other species on Earth. You know, our ability to adapt is definitely, you know, one of our strongest points. But the other thing is our ability to work together. It's us coming together that increases our survivability. And one of the things that we use in order to stay together, you know, to form lasting communities and lasting relationships, is our ability to work with one another, to come together, to have discussions, to share experiences, and that seems to be going by the wayside these days, now more than ever. Or at least that's how it feels to me. And it bothers me. It's like these days we just cannot, we can't see eye on even the stupidest of things, the smallest of things. And to make matters worse, on issues, especially really important issues, we can't even compromise. There is no compromise. There is no cooperation. There is no civil discourse. It's just coming together in small little groups and sticking to echo chambers. And anybody who doesn't reflect that echo chamber is instantly the enemy. Even if the person who doesn't fit that echo chamber, the reason why they don't fit is because of one little aspect of the ideology that they just don't see with. They'll agree with you in just about every other point, but then one particular aspect, boom, you're instantly the Antichrist and then it's over. And this all or nothing approach is not going to get us anywhere. In fact, it's just going to make matters worse. Now, I do understand that these days and times, especially in the US, I understand that there's just some things that you can't, stakes are high, or at least they really feel like they're high. You know, people are uncertain about the economy. There's a hell of a lot of uncertainty with our leadership right now. Politics are volatile. You know, all this type of crap is going on, and many people are, you know, facing the fact that their kids are not going to have a better, you know, life than they've had, you know, than the parents have had. Like past generations, you know, were expecting that the next generation would live better than them, and that is no longer a certainty. It's no longer the reality. Certain issues are so freaking important, and there's so many things hitting us at once that it can be really hard to just sit down and reflect on things. When you're living your day-to-day life just trying to make sure you can put food on the table, and then there are other particular aspects of life that you are passionate about that seem to be crumbling in front of your eyes, I can understand, you know, the emotional response to just want to lash out. You know, just F everyone and everything, and you just want to stick with people who at least understand or at least see eye to eye with your particular perspective. Problem is, that's not how we get things done. Anyone will tell you that any type of relationship depends on compromise. It depends on proper communication, on civil discourse. You know, I'm just coming together. And we're not doing that as a society anymore. You know, I find it kind of funny that these days it's the so-called intellectual types or the logical types who are really falling victim to this. I remember when I first showed up on YouTube, you know, it was a common criticism of the religious crowd that they kept putting themselves in little echo chambers, which is why they weren't able to accept facts. You know, the atheistic types that I used to hang around with would come up with that criticism, and I did as well. He said that the main reason why these guys are being bamboozled right now, it's funny that the difference in... It's funny how the whole situation's kind of changed. Like way in the past, when I first came on YouTube, religious types were just completely unprepared to be able to debate. They just were not used to having their ideas, their belief systems, their ideologies challenged, because they had lived in a bubble for most of the time. You know, whatever small town they came in or whatever community of people that they came from, all believed the same things they did, all said the same things they did. They all echoed the same stuff that they were taught. So when all of a sudden they were faced, you know, they get online, they go on the internet, and now they're faced with people with completely different backgrounds and, you know, different education systems and all that type of stuff, and, you know, got a scientific background, logical background, whatever. They just were not prepared for this. They were not prepared to be challenged mentally. And they fell apart. And people poked fun at that. And now everyone's having the same problem, where, you know, instead of challenging your views, instead of like facing differences of opinion, differences in ideology, and being willing to discuss these particular points, you know, nah, it's straight up, no, you're wrong, and if you're wrong, then you're bad, you're evil, and that's it. It's like, you have to stick with your particular echo chamber. No one's challenging any of their own beliefs or ideologies. And that's a problem, especially when you want to stick with ideology rather than sticking with trying to solve the problem. I honestly think that solving the problem is a little bit more important than sticking to ideology, especially if whatever ideology you have doesn't necessarily reflect reality. All thoughts and belief systems and ideologies deserve to be re-examined again and again. Even if you are sure it's right, you may not be. Humanity has constantly proven that it keeps getting things wrong more than it gets things right. So we need to keep re-examining things. And one of the best ways we can do that is to constantly keep discussing it with people who may not share the same one. Now, I understand that there are certain issues that, you know, certain things that you just aren't going to be able to compromise on. If it comes down to something, if somebody's ideology supports something extremely heinous, you know, it's all about someone's personal gain or a small group of people's personal gain over the welfare of everyone else in society, then yeah, that's something that you're not exactly going to be able to see eye to eye on no matter what. But there's certain issues that us on the ground level should at least be able to discuss rationally, and that's just not happening now, is it? And that's a problem. It's a huge problem. Now, I know this is gonna come across as being very wishy-washy, like, oh, you want everybody to sing Kumbaya here? No, not necessarily. I just want people to, the more important the issue, the more important the problem, the more I feel that we should be able to come together to at least see eye to eye on it and try to solve it. I mean, the fact that, for all this talk about how different we are, and there is a hell of a lot of emphasis on our differences these days, and that's done on purpose, by the way. The more you focus on the differences, the more you can see the other group as the other. And thus you're not going to be willing to work with them because you're no longer seeing them as fellow human beings. But it's funny how much we see eye to eye on just about... The more you move away from ideology and propaganda, and you know what you're being told about other groups of people, and actually sit down and talk to other groups of people, the more you begin to realize that we actually see eye to eye on quite a lot. The difference comes in what we think the solution is. You could, like, so many times you'll sit down and talk to people and you'll find that everyone gets this idea, at least on the ground level, something's wrong. I'm sure you hear this all the time. People say there's something wrong with America, there's something wrong with our country today, or politics, or whatever, what have you. there's this sense that something is off. And the more you talk to people, the more they'll start saying the same things. Like, I have yet to hear people saying that they like Congress in the U.S. Like, everybody says that like Congress is screwed up and it's corrupt and we need to kick all the bums out or whatever. I mean, hell, the whole concept of draining the swamp, by the Trump supporters shows that they were just as frustrated with the way government was working as the opposite, their so-called opposite group was. The difference isn't the solution. And that's when you're going to have to sit down and try to figure out the solution. And say what you want about, yes, some solutions are better than others. But at least, at the very, very least, and I'm working on like bare minimum here, at least they're trying to solve the problem and at least acknowledging that there is one. We're dealing with a situation where people can't even agree on, sometimes you can't even agree on what the problem is or what even reality is. Because of, propaganda and ridiculous ideology, sometimes we can't even argue on just what the situation actually is. What the problem actually is, and that's a major hurdle to overcome. But when you guys are actually able to, at the very least, identify a problem, and there are many instances where all of us agree, yeah, this X is the problem, you got something to work from, and then you can build from there. And even if you can't necessarily agree on what the reality is, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't discuss things anymore. I'm not saying this out of a sense of like this wishy-washy idealism. I'm speaking from experience. I don't have that many friends. I never really have, and my circle of friends remains small for a reason. But I've had many different acquaintances, people who I was cordial with, who I had many different discussions from. And they came from all different walks of life and different ideological backgrounds. And even amongst my small circle of friends, we don't always see eye to eye on things. Obviously there's some similarities in our thinking, otherwise we most likely wouldn't be friends, but there are differences. And yet I'm still able to discuss things with them that other people would consider heated topics. It happens all the time in my life. K Biomech, those of you who've been on my channel since the very beginning, you may recognize that name. He's the reason why I have a YouTube channel to begin with, because he was my very first video was a response to his. Some people may be surprised to hear this, but he and I come from two different political backgrounds. We have different ideologies that we follow. And yet, you look at our videos and it doesn't seem like that, does it? We're not at each other's throats, and we're not saying that, oh, this person's wrong or that person's wrong. Because there's certain things that we agree with, and we work from that premise. We work on what we agree with, we work on our similarities, and just use our differences to enhance the discussion, to come up with different solutions, to present different ideas, and work from there. And it's through that difference, it's always through different experiences and different perspectives that one can get a better look at what quote-unquote reality is, or what the truth is. And he and I understand that. He and I come from two different backgrounds. I can tell you that right now, especially from our private conversations. I know this for a fact. Like, people know my stuff tends to lean a little bit more left. His leans a little bit more right. Doesn't bother us. We're able to have decent conversations without tearing each other down, and we're both able to, after having discussions, come to very similar conclusions, or like, I see your point here. Maybe this is what we should go with. It can be done. Even recently, there are some friends of mine who, like, recent affairs in the U.S. with completely different ideological viewpoints on them. I've bumped into people who were on the other side of the fence when it came to things going on. And yet, these people and myself, we were able to have long, civil discussions where at the end of it, we both walked away pretty happy, like, wow, that was rather pleasant. It wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't like being on the internet, where all you get is just people trolling or people yelling at each other. It's like, no, this is what I think. And the other person goes, well, this is what I think. And like, okay, I see why you think that. I see your point. It's just you may not have factored in this, that, and this. Oh, okay, I didn't see it that way. But the reason why I thought that is because of this and this. Oh, I see. Well, this is why this is happening. Oh, this is why this is happening. So what do you think this should... Well, I think maybe we should do this. That's not a bad start, but conversations like that just don't happen. At least in the public space anymore. And that's a major freaking problem, because you can't solve a problem unless you're willing to communicate with each other like you're freaking human beings. Again, I understand the stresses these days. I understand how people feel that a hell of a lot is at stake, and you just can't compromise on certain things. And yes, there are certain things I believe you can't compromise on. But before you go to war, you should at least try to be diplomatic first. And yeah, I know what I'm saying, because there have been attempts to be civil in the past, and we know how they've turned out. But you got to remember that most of us down here, most of us who are arguing with each other, are all the grunts at the ground level. We're the ones feeling the effects of the problems that we are having, that we are dealing with. The issues that that we're discussing, the things that are making us angry, we're all feeling the effects. The heated arguments, we should be having those with those who are causing them. And we're not doing that. We're having the arguments with each other. And yet we're all fucked. So it's like, it's like a bunch of prisoners in a jail cell, and they're all yelling at each other about the fact that they're being treated like shit in the prison, and blaming each other for the fact that they're being treated like shit in the prison, when their fight should be with the wardens. So if both of you guys are agreeing that your conditions in there suck, well, right there you're both acknowledging the same thing. So yeah, you guys may have different ideas on how to solve the problem. One group may think that maybe you should protest or try to talk to them rationally. Other people think that maybe you should have a rebellion against, just take over the prison. Okay, that's two radically different solutions. You guys can meet in the middle somewhere, because both of you are trying to achieve the same thing, to end your miserable conditions in the prison. That's a start, right? And sometimes it's, it's more than just simply recognizing that you guys are seeing it's the same problem. Sometimes it's also on how you talk to one another. Just how you speak to one another can really change how the conversation goes and how you guys regard each other. Proper communication goes a long way, believe me, guys. Don't believe me? Okay. I'm about to bring up a very contested topic. It's one that I didn't really want to bring up on this channel these days. I mean, if this was in the past, I probably would have. These days, I'm kind of leery on it. I'm just like, I'm going to bring it up now, just as an example of how you can have this sort of discussion. And I warn you people right now, I start seeing any BS in the comment section over this, I will cut off heads left and right. Okay? This is my channel, and my channel is not a democracy. I normally go for free speech on the comment section. There's some things that I've seen hurled in my direction that I know other people would not let slide. I've let a lot of BS slide in the past. I will not tolerate any crap here. I see any sort of nonsense, and you'll know what I mean when I start going into my example. I see any sort of BS nonsense on this, you will be cut. Consider this your warning. So let's bring up let's bring up something that's sure to get the blood boiling, and that's the concept of white privilege. And it's a very contested topic. I'm not going to get... We know, generally you know, or at least you think you know, what this concept means. Here's my thing. How is this being discussed? How is it being discussed? How is it being presented to somebody who may not necessarily see eye to eye with this concept? Well, let me bring up the typical scenario that is brought up a lot when people are talking about this. Besides the whole issue with cops. Like, I can bring up, for instance, the fact that we know what happens if a black guy gets pulled over by the cops, and if he wants to not, if he's hoping not to get shot, there's a certain way he needs to behave. Meanwhile, I remember a video that was very popular where this white guy got pulled over for speeding, and the guy pretty much has a temper tantrum right in front of the cop, right down to ripping up the ticket and throwing it at the dude's feet, and nothing happens to the guy. That's a, well, famous example. But let me bring up another one that's brought up a lot. It's used. And it's the whole thing about what happens when two people are trying to vie for the same job. And this has actually been proven. You can take a resume which has the exact same, it's like the exact same resume, same credentials, same experience cited, same schools gone to, degrees, what have you. Same level of experience, period. Like just copy pasted resumes. Except on one resume you got a white sounding name, and on the other resume you got a black sounding name. Most of the time the guy with the white sounding name is the one who's going to be brought in for the interview, even though the experience is the same. That is usually a good example brought about the whole concept of white privilege. Now here's the thing. When these things are being presented by the average layperson as an example of a problem, and then the other side gets mad, usually the other side, they always say that, oh, the other side's being petulant. Or, you know, the other side, you know, they're just too selfish to understand that this is a problem. They're so caught up in their privilege, they don't see what the problem is. Maybe that's true. But there's something else that I've noticed that is almost never brought up. And I don't understand why. Let's say that there's two got people. One black guy, one white guy. Instead of it just being an experiment, let's just actually say there's two people who actually, instead of just copy-pasting a resume, no, it's two people who actually did go to school, get the straight A's, went to college, got their degrees, built up their job experience, have an awesome resume. They present their resumes to the company, and the company sees that one name is, I don't know, Sanford Jenkins or Tyrone or something, and the other guy's name, like, you know, Christopher Reeves or whatever. You get what I'm saying. One's a black sounding name, the other's a white sounding name. And of course the white sounding name dude gets the interview first. And people instantly go, see, white privilege. Okay, that's true. But you want to know what also is true? The white guy did still go to school to get those particular credentials. He didn't cheat. That's the thing that's missing in this conversation, which makes the white guys mad. At least with some of them. Some people are just simply mad because they're just going to get mad anytime race is brought up. I'm not going to lie. But it is also true that people also get mad if they are perceived that they didn't earn what they got. The average person wants to believe that they earned what they got. That they weren't just handed that. And when you imply that they were just handed that, they're going to get mad. Now, maybe it's true that they were just handed that, but it also doesn't negate the fact that they did work for those credentials. So it's one thing to just simply say, you see, you're benefiting from white privilege. But imagine if you had brought up the argument instead as, this is what's happening. Both of you went through the same boot camp, but because you happen to have less melanin, your merits were not even regarded. You went through all that hard work, and yet the only reason why you're sitting there is because this guy just, his preconceived notion of what your merits are. You want a meritocracy, or at least you claim to, but your merits are not really what's being considered here. That's the problem. Wouldn't you at least want to believe that you earned that job through, like, it's like, I did this to get through school. This other guy, maybe he did, or maybe he did less of it, and now you both are competing. When you compete and you win, you want to feel that you won because you won. You personally won. It wasn't that the system was rigged for you, or that, you know, or that you were able to cheat somehow. I mean, sheesh, when we play video games, isn't that the main thing that kind of pisses us off? That when we're all competing and playing a video game, if the game is, you know, badly balanced, we get mad because we want to make it a fair shot for everybody so that it's your skill alone that helps you win. Or when a game happens to have pay to win, you know, properties in it. You know, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this guy just paid his way through when meanwhile I was busting my ass to get through. This is bullshit. This speaks to our desire for our own merits, our own talents, our own skills to earn us things. So when a system is in place that kind of undermines that, wouldn't that get on your nerves? It's only the dishonest individuals who will be like, yeah, I want to be able to cheat through this. And yeah, the average human being hates that sort of guy, regardless of how much melanin you have. Now, I'm not, I'm not clairvoyant or anything. I can't read minds. But something tells me that you present the argument that way, maybe they aren't necessarily going to completely agree with you, but they're going to be a little bit more receptive to how you speak to them and be more willing to have a conversation instead of a straight up, you benefited from X, Y, and Z. And the guy's like, but I went to school. Again, I'm not negating the concept of privilege. I'm just saying sometimes it all depends on how you present it. If you're trying to have a dialogue, have a dialogue. If you're trying to just point fingers and make accusations, well, then of course it's going to be conflict. And then that comes down to, well, what do you want? To have a conflict or solve the problem? This is not me trying to be wishy-washy, okay? This is not me wanting to sing Kumbaya. This is about me wanting to solve a problem. One of many problems that's in our society. And you have to be willing to compromise with different groups of people if you're going to solve a social problem. Because social problems mean that you're dealing with the society at large. And you and your group are not the only ones living in that society. Like it or not, you're gonna have to want to speak to the other groups. This goes to everybody. And you're gonna have to be willing to see the other groups as human beings. And you also are going to have to accept the fact that maybe, just maybe, you might be wrong about something. You just might be. I mean, usually, some groups are a little bit more educated than others, and so they got a hell of a lot of facts on their side. But overall, we don't know it all. We don't. I certainly don't. And I can agree when I'm misinformed about a particular thing. When, like, oh, it was this. Like the whole gun rights issues, for instance, but I don't want to get into that. Like, people know how I stand on that. I personally think that the gun bans are ineffective. For a variety of reasons. You've seen my old videos, you know why. That's not a particular position that is properly supported by those on the left. I have my reasons why I think the way I do, but that's not what I'm getting to here. This has gone on way too long. The point that I'm trying to make is this. If people are feeling that things are getting more and more volatile, and yeah, they most likely are. They are. But part of that reason is because we're just not talking to one another anymore. We're just yelling at each other. And if you're yelling at each other and you're starting to form your little groups, yeah, that means you're drawing the lines in the sand and war is inevitable. If you actually want to solve the problem, you're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to start talking to one another. And believe it or not, we're seeing eye to eye on more things than you think. We are. Just look at the net neutrality issue, for instance. They tried to make it the freaking, companies out there, the ISPs, they were trying to make it a left and right issue. And it wasn't. Most Americans were for it. That should have ended the debate right there. It already did, at least on the ground level. It was just greedy freaking companies that tried to make it so that it became a political issue based on ideology. No, you greedy motherfuckers are trying to get more money off of us. And we know it. Both sides can agree with this. The healthcare issue. Healthcare is too freaking expensive. The pharmaceutical companies are completely fucking us over. Most people can agree with that. I know that, the whole, quote-unquote Obamacare thing, there's, many different divisions on it. But as time went on, more and more people are kind of seeing eye to eye on the same thing. The whole, hell, even in the beginning, people were pretty much agreeing. The healthcare industry is corrupt. We need to do something about it. Problem is that problem was never really solved. We just ended up yelling at each other based on ideology and never really got to the issue at hand. We're paying too much for what we're getting. And we are still paying too much for what we're getting. I doubt you're going to find people disagreeing on this unless they're completely misinformed. And then all you have to do is, educate them. Which, for some strange reason, people seem to think is something you shouldn't be doing. Well, if you're not educating them, how you expect them to know shit? Oh, they should just be looking this stuff up. If you don't have an interest, or if you already think you have the answer, why are you going to be researching it? Simple question. This has gone on way longer than I wanted to, but I think you get my point. I don't know what to do to solve this problem. I just know that if we want to get anywhere, we're gonna have to compromise. We have to have real discussions with one another again, and stop sitting in echo chambers all the damn time. But let me just leave it off here. This has already gone over half an hour, so I might as well go the whole hog and just end it off here. There is money to be made in people staying in echo chambers. It's just pure and simple. There is money to be made in keeping people in echo chambers. There are reasons for keeping people in echo chambers. These days we just seem to be focused on a system that's based on pure exploitation. Exploiting your emotions, exploiting your desires, exploiting your habits, exploiting the way your mind works, all to get a little extra dosh out of you, or to get extra support from you to keep certain people in power. It has little to do with actually doing something to your benefit. It's more about lining pockets and keeping people in charge. You got to get out the echo chamber if you want to even begin to get off this yoke. The echo chambers are not good for you. We have plenty of examples of this. We make fun of people who surround themselves with yes men all the time. And many of the people who are caught up in echo chambers now were the same people who were pointing fingers at the religious groups in the past for doing the exact same thing when they went on YouTube. When they were caught up in echo chambers and they didn't know how to deal with people from different backgrounds when they faced them. You're gonna have to stop. You gotta get over your cowardice of having a civil discussion with other people. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, because all groups are having this problem. It doesn't really matter what your political persuasion is. You're gonna want to talk to them and they're gonna want to yell at you. Someone's gonna have to be the bigger person and endure that shit and try to present it in a way to at least get them to go, huh. They don't have to agree. They just have to go, huh. That's the foot in the door. That's when you can actually sit down at the negotiating table. That's when you can start compromising. Compromise is not a bad word, especially if it means that at the end of the day, both people walk away from the table happy and the problem is solved. You have to be willing to communicate and work with one another for that to happen. You can't work with each other if you're at each other's throats. Hell, and you definitely can't work with each other if we're arguing over something as stupid as entertainment. We've got major issues going on, folks. The last thing I want to see is people making freaking huge, sweeping political and ideological generalizations based on what type of video game somebody likes to play. That's just dumb. Anyway, enough of that. Next video will be a little bit, better, a lighter mood than this one. Catch you guys later.